Namaste and welcome to PODS by PEI, a policy discussion series hosted by Policy Entrepreneurs Inc. I'm your host, Nirjan Rai, and with me is my colleague and co-host, Soumitra Nupande. Hi, Soumitra.
Hello, Nirjan. Hello, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to this another episode of Pods by PEI.
All right, so we are recording this on March 2026. It's been about a month since our last episode with Dr. Bora, where we were unpacking the underlying issues around the Gen Z movement. Um, and those were the underlying factors that eventually led to the March 5th elections. But the Nepal we are discussing today looks fundamentally different from the Nepal that we were discussing about a month ago, at least on the surface. The March 5th election has delivered a verdict that feels like a signal to an end of an era. The numbers are staggering. The Rastriya Swatantra Party, RSP, which was established only about 5 years ago, maybe even less than 5 years ago, has secured 182 seats, which is just shy of the two-thirds majority. Meanwhile, the traditional parties of Nepali politics, the Nepali Congress and the UML have been pushed to the sidelines with just about 14 and about 9% of the total seats, respectively. Furthermore, heavyweights like KP Oli and even figures such as the reformists within the older parties, folks like Gagan Thapa, have lost their seats. Before we bring in our guest and start unpacking what all of this means for Nepali politics moving forward, Soumitra, let's begin with our own reflections. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go first.
Please stand.
Okay. So for me, as the results came in and it became clear that the old establishment parties and the leaders had been almost completely wiped off the board, it felt like something had finally come to an end. It felt like the movement had reached its conclusion. And what I mean by that is, in the days after September 8th and 9th, there was still a lot of hesitation around whether we should call it a movement or a rupture or uprising. People weren't sure, and to be honest, I wasn't sure as well, because on the surface, nothing seemed to have really changed, right? Yes, there was an interim government. Yes, the younger generation seemed to have some level of influence over that particular government, but the old faces, the old guards, were still very much in control. Oli still had a firm grip over UML. Prachanda, in his own shrewd ways, managed to signal change without really changing anything. Even in Nepali Congress, Deoba, despite all the humiliation, was gradually being pulled back into the center by his inner circle. And for a while, it felt like nothing had changed. But then suddenly it did, right? The Nepali people went to the polls, and in one collective voice, they swept away an entire generation of political leadership. And as that landslide became clear, it started dawning on me that the movement of September 8th and 9th had finally come full circle with a complete reset at the top. So how I put this is, if the movement of the 1950s brought power back from the Ranas to the monarchy, if the movement of the 1990s marked the shift from monarchy to democracy, and if the movement of the 2000s reshaped Nepal into a federal republic, then this electoral moment, ignited by the Gen Z protests on September 8th, carried forward by the citizens of Nepal on September 9th, and ultimately decided at the ballot box on March 5th, feels like a reclaiming of democracy itself. And it's in this that I'm hopeful. I'm still skeptical, but hopeful that there is a real chance to make change happen. I'm skeptical because some of the challenges that we face in our country are systemic, but I find hope. Sorry, I went a bit up on a length there, but Soumitra, let me bring you in. What is your single biggest takeaway?
No, these are some good observations from your end, Nejan. I think that kind of reflects how the country as a whole has been thinking around what has happened with the elections and how people see change. At my end, I don't know. I mean, maybe I was expecting a different result. I was not expecting a result of this nature, to be precise. I think it was well understood as you framed it that we were expecting some changes that will emanate with old guards losing out to new faces. But as we did discuss during Dr. Boda's conversation, we were observing how different political parties were strategizing and engaging with the public, and it was clear that RASOPA, the Rastriya Swatantra Party, were gaining grounds. They had a very different campaign strategy, and it all signaled the fact that they would be kind of coming into the parliament with some heavyweight, right? So maybe not a clear two-third majority, but quite significant. The conversations I had with a few people in Bhairava, if you remember, I had mentioned then also that there was this feeling among people that they wanted to be part of a large change process. They also mentioned that people didn't have that opportunity, especially in subnational areas, unlike Kathmandu in urban areas during the last elections where they voted for new parties. So all of that aside, I mean, the results itself, sea of blue. We've changed colors from red and green to blue. That's quite a big transition for the country to go into. I think this is a big departure. It's somewhat encouraging, though maybe it does not reflect how people have voted generally. It's very difficult to say from my end if that sea of blue is representative of the confidence people have on Rastriya Swatantra Party in general, or is that confidence emanating from the fact that the campaign strategy really focused on highlighting Balen as the future prime minister and how Balen kind of galvanized support. If you look across his strategies, he was going north, south, east, west. He was going everywhere. I did manage to talk to voters post-election, and then many confirmed that their support for the party was primarily because of Balen, especially if you go to the Tarai, right? So people gave him names. Balam, they used to call him, right? Or they still call him. So in Tarai language, that means son or a kind one type of thing. So it's really that. So for me, I don't know. I mean, it looks like we are in a parliamentary system, but are already moving into a presidential system of elections. I'll stop there.
Now, it is an interesting point you bring, which is reflects the populist nature of politics in Nepal at the moment, right? And the question around how the blue RSP will govern in the coming days, which will be at the heart of our discussion today. So let's see how far we can examine that. Let's bring in our guest for the day, Bishnu Sapkota. Bishnu is a writer, a keen political analyst, and someone who consistently cuts through the noise of Nepali politics with great clarity. This, I should remind, is actually his second time on PODS by PEI. The last time, unsurprisingly, was after the 2022 elections when we invited him to reflect on the results back then, particularly the rise of the independence and the emergence of RSP. Bishnu, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Great to be here with you both.
So you've just heard both of our reflections. Maybe we can start with a quick introduction from you and then your single biggest takeaway from this election.
Sure. And thank you for introducing me. I'm somebody who watches politics, observes, and I write and comment also publicly. So in terms of the takeaways, I think both of you captured, in a really interesting way in terms of what it means, what is it. So without repeating much, when I agree with both of your observations, what I'd like to add is that this is in Nepal's political history, the Gen Z uprising movement protest. You refer to them about what to call, how to call them, how to define. I think it's for the first time in Nepal's political history that we have seen a revolt or a movement from within democratic framework. The first one, 1951, first democratic movement was for democracy, and there was a coup. and again in 1990, it was to get back democracy from the absolute monarchy. And in 2006, the Second People's Movement also was the seven-party alliance and the Maoist to restore the parliament and again bring democracy back on track and start the peace process. So here we had a functioning democracy, if that was what we can call functioning, where a democratic framework. So the movement, the protest was from within the democratic framework. That's one important takeaway, that a movement within democracy, that democracy is not enough. So this is to make democracy functional. This is to make democracy deliver. This is people coming out to express what democracy should mean to them, not to those old established parties around which the power is always revolving, but it doesn't really mean much to the people. Then the second takeaway that I have is that this is for governance, like good governance. But interesting is, Neil, that you touched upon it, saying this is a populist. While we can debate about that, whether it's populism or what is populism, but I was struck when you said that, meaning that people are looking for change so desperately. So they have RSP, like almost a two-third, very close to a two-third, for a change with Balen Shah, as like Soumitra, as you said, like as if we had a presidential election, although it's a parliamentary system. But okay, change and for governance, but what is RSP offering, or what was actually Balen in particular? What is his vision for governance? What is his vision for change? He didn't have to explain much. Like Balen Shah, his persona, that enigmatic personality, or the hope people have around his personality, that is quite interesting. I think it will be interesting to talk in our conversation in the next hour.
No, I like the statement. It is a revolt of democracy within democracy. So this is something unique that's happening, and I hope that the change that people are looking for will produce better results. We will get into how this might pan out in the discussions in the later segments, but let's begin with actually dissecting the electoral results. So maybe where we can start is, before the elections, we were talking about this is going to be, or rather, this is a battle of the narratives, right? And whoever wins the election gets to carry forward its narrative. RSPU had positioning itself as the agent of change in the politics of alternatives. You had Nepali Congress presenting itself as a party that had actually listened to the demands of the Gen Zs, right? And they were in the process of reforming. And then you had UML, which essentially rejected the premise of the movement, framing it as disorder and then something driven by external forces. Now that the results are out, how do you think the battle of the narratives will play out? And how does this impact the future of political space in Nepal?
Yeah, this is a big question. I mean, of course, very important, very important, but big because and then we have to wait for a long time to really get an answer in the practical term. So how I see is, okay, election results. Of course, like nobody predicted this result. Like now, towards the date of the election, some of us thought maybe RSP will get a majority, maybe close to a majority, but nobody expected this. So one is the RSP itself may still be processing. Okay, what does it really mean? But I think at the moment, what we can see is this desperateness of people for change, that the complete departure from the established parties. I think that is evident. What does the election result mean is people didn't care who is going to come. I mean, of course, they knew it was going to be Balen, RSP, but they didn't care, okay, what will they do? Let's first get rid of the old and then we'll see. That's one. And the next is, in the last 3.5 years, after Balen was elected as mayor of Kathmandu, of course, there are some of his activities which were controversial, but his image throughout the country, like Balen is doing so great in Kathmandu, and if we have Balen as prime minister, so even if we're going to have a regular election after 2 years, when the last parliament was complete 5 years, and if Balen opened a party, he would still be a force. That is how I would hypothesize. So let's remember here that in the past many years, one political section was advocating for a directly elected executive head. So Balen has now come as that executive head who, like Soumitra said earlier, as like directly elected. So in practice, although it's a parliamentary system, RSP as a party will choose him as the leader and he will be the prime minister. But through the election, through the ballot, they have chosen the executive head, executive prime minister. I mean, in effect. So what that means is that the whole hope is now resting on one person, Balen's performance. And this is very interesting. Interesting in the sense that, okay, RSP as a party, they have their manifesto, which they call Pratigyapada, the promise plays or whatever. But Balen, I don't know how much he cares that it's going to be the mandate for him and how he sees what is his vision to govern. So it's so much individual centric. So although we have a party behind Balen, but in terms of agenda, it seems to be like a solo performance as a prime minister.
Can I ask you to dig deeper into this element on RSP? Right, you mentioned you have Balen as the individual, but there is a party behind him. But you also mentioned they're a party of, they're not your traditional party, right? They're not bound by a shared ideology, but more of a moment. How do you think they are going to evolve if they are going to govern well? How do you think they are going to evolve into a more cohesive institution? And maybe you can look at some of the earliest indicators in the post-election period, right? With their orientation program, so on and so forth, that they've stated out. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, interesting. RSP is a rainbow. It's a positive word and I'm using it deliberately. They are a rainbow of a party. When they formed nearly 4 years ago, okay, Ravi Lamithane, a former TV host at the time, just wanted to open a party. And there were many people who were unsatisfied with the old parties or with, everything else that was there. And they joined him. But not many people trusted him because Ravi Lamithane himself was not any big personality other than being popular among masses as a TV host, raising people's issues. Not as somebody who is intellectual or who has a political vision, or how does he look at Nepal's recent history or like ancient history or future. There was nothing. So in that sense, it was one popular guy who formed a party and he brought together a few people. That was 4 years ago. What is RSP now? To your question, or this very important question actually, what is RSP now is, it's an amalgamation of multiple perspectives and political orientation. So you have Swarnim Wagle, who is a vice president, who was a Nepali Congress, like a liberal Democrat. And then look at other people, the Vivekshil party. Actually, a few years ago, they were the real genuine one who advocated for a good governance and really, as they came out, the youths led by late Ujjwal Thapa, as like alternative political force for the youth. So Vivekshil also has been merged with RSP. So you have so many people from multiple political orientations, expectations, and perspectives. But predominantly, they are, these people, they have democratic forces. There are some who have joined from the left also, but I don't think they will prevail in the party. Okay, having said this, because this is very interesting question, and this will actually shape up our next few years, and then delivery of the government, and this is really critical. So in terms of political vision, while RSP we can define them at the moment as of course, democratic, from their statute. Liberal Democrats, or they also have, because of how the socialist orientation was in Nepal, they got over with that. But, there are people who believe in that. And then RSP or Balen also has immersed, so many other like Madhes movement, like the Madhes-based political parties, they were uprooted, eliminated in the election because Balen Shah himself is son of Madhes. Like he's not a resident Madhesi, but his parents were Madhesis, right? So many things have come together in RSP, everything together. So now what does this mean in terms of the political vision? They have fully owned the 2015 constitution. There were questions about whether they were fully committed to implement federalism. But now they have clarified, yeah, there are certain things that may have to be amended, but we are fully committed to that. In terms of, okay, their economic policy and the departure they will take, and in terms of like education and anti-corruption, how to restructure so many things, the constitutional bodies and make democracy functional, about which there have not been any debates other than the skeleton that is there in their election plays, which are just bullet points, which, I mean, if you compare them with Nepali Congress, actually, you could say, arguably, it's not very different from between the two. It may just be about, language or presentation. But that is why it's important. Like, how are they going to define themselves politically? Okay, how do they look at, the last 20 years? Because it's very critical. Like, Nepal had a conflict and there was a peace agreement and the struggle to write a new constitution, which is still being implemented, number one. The transitional justice issue is still to be addressed, so peace process is not complete. Where do they stand on that? No, there is no debate. In terms of governance, okay, corruption, everybody is frustrated with corruption, but then so what? What is the method? Like, we have agencies, we have constitutional bodies, but they have not been able to do much. So in terms of those points, I'll stop this by saying that there is so much of expectation, people's hope, but in terms of how RSP will deliver, is we'll have to watch, because it's just an amalgamation of people from different political perspectives and backgrounds, and many are new. I'll stop there.
I'd like to bring the conversation around the old establishment parties, so Nepali Congress and UML. So, despite having very different strategies, they had very similar results. What does that mean, and where do these two parties go from here?
Before coming here, Nirjan, can I just add one point about the RSP and
Sure,
the
sure.
harmony? You had I talked about it, but yeah, just one point as we talk. So RSP as a party, like, is this one political organization in terms of having one coherent, harmonious vision? No, they are not. Okay. So which is going to be the main challenge. So where do they stand on so many things? Let's forget about like the big ideological issues, but in terms of working for good governance, like where does their vision come from, and who are going to be like the how to say the think tank within the party? So we haven't seen that, and what kind of discussions or debates are going to take place within the party, like among these individuals who come from so many different backgrounds. That's why, at least in the public, we haven't seen. And my guess is that they haven't started to have that discussion even internally. So is it going to be like individuality, like personality driven, that you have one minister who has one vision and you have another minister who has another vision and you have prime minister who is supposed to carry the whole vision and people's hope, and then you have party and Ravi Lamisane, who is not eligible to be even an parliamentarian, and he cannot join the government because of the pending cases in the court. So I think that's why what kind of political party RSP will become in terms of representing the vision, or at least coming up with a vision and delivering that's going to be I don't know what to be cynical or skeptical, but the real challenge will be there for RSP to be a party and have consolidate consolidate one vision. That harmony question. I just wanted to comment that. And then coming back to the World Party, you framed this point very interestingly that, okay, that is the consistency in terms of the way they all uprooted. Like, there is some kind of, how to say, it's not like people did not discriminate much among the old. Like, they're like punished proportionately. So I think what that tells is that the colossal frustration against everybody that was old. And look at Nepali Congress, like Govind Thapa, like they took so much risk, to break apart from, and then to leave the whole generation behind. And then, the special convention, organizing a special convention was risky in terms of like splitting the party or the election commission not giving them legitimacy. And they would have been finished, the younger generation, say led by Govind Thapa, but they took the risk. But what did it mean for the election? But they were also perceived as the part of the old. Okay, they tried, but that message did not go across. So for KP Oli and Prachanda, Prachanda-led Nepali Communist Party, I think they were all dumped in the same basket. They're all old. So for people, what they represented was, of course, they have a glorious past and they fought for democracy, federalism, and people's rights, and Nepal's other movements, Madhesh and ethnic movements. So while people may have acknowledged, but this is time to move on.
But a quick question on that would be: is there institutionally, where is the pressure going to come for them to reform? Is it internal? Is it external? I mean, we do see the votes coming in, but how do they actually go about in the coming days? What are their options to reform?
I think first of all they have to admit that they have to reform. Like some have not admitted. I haven't heard in the last few days after the election, at least like UML. No, there is no introspection. Like they have asked the local committees to send an assessment in terms of why their party did not do well, but they are not looking at their leadership. The central committee, party chairman. So that means they haven't even accepted that or admitted that they have to introspect. And Nepali Communist Party also no. I think even until now they're not able to fully understand the depth of what it means. They are being uprooted. So first would be to realize that. And second would be, I think, I see it a little, it's not easy for them to reform. Because let's separate the two communist parties, UML, CPN, and then Congress. Let's talk about the two leftist parties first. For the leftist parties, in terms of their the ideological politics, the rhetoric and the jargon, and that was pretty classic and in my assessment outdated. But still they were doing well until the last election. It's because in the last 40, 50 years, like starting in like Nepal's 1970s when the leftist parties, became a force during the underground time. So from 1970s onward, and then later the Maoist insurgency. So they had a good organization in the grassroots. People really had hope, and there are so many people like, their members and all that. So it was their base and through which, and there was no other alternative. That's why they were doing well. But in terms of the political vision, they hadn't reformed and they hadn't updated themselves. Their software was like too old, right? So they have to start from updating their software itself. The hardware, I mean, as we saw, RSP showed that we don't need a hardware. Like RSP as a party, they don't have any sister organizations. They don't have like tens of hundreds of thousands of members like Nepali Congress and other parties had. So the software part is important. So it's starting from, okay, what do they represent? What is their political vocabulary, or how are they going to speak to people? It has to be a complete overhaul for the two parties. First, by admitting that, okay, now time has changed, political era has changed, and then we as an institution, what do we represent? They have to start from there. And then practice a genuine internal party democracy so that the new people who can come to the leadership at the national level and at different other levels. For Congress, I'll be very fair. Actually, let's call it a revolt. The special convention was like a revolt within Nepali Congress. It has an important message, I think. I mean, regardless of the result, that they were not able to perform well in the election. But regardless, I think what Gagan Thapa, Bishnu Sharma, and the team were able to do is really remarkable in the sense of like practicing internal party democracy. So I think the significance of this Congress reform practice effort goes beyond Congress itself. Say for the old two parties, the one I just mentioned, the UML and the Nepali Communist Party. And this message is also important for RSP because RSP is still to become a vibrant, functional party, having one political vision and, clarity of vision. And RSP hasn't held even a single general convention after their formation. And now Balen Shah as the force larger than party, I think at some point in the next 1 or 2 years, they will have to organize a general convention. So that is why the Nepali Congress Special Convention is very important in terms of Nepali political parties getting to that transition of practicing internal party democracy. Because in the immediate next few years, the main political agenda should be the internal democracy, the intra-party democracy. Because if there is no intra-party democracy, then there will be no transparency, and it will be the parties who will lead the government, and the lack of transparency and accountability within the party will reflect in lack of transparency and accountability at the government level.
Just to add more texture to this, Bishnu, this message from the public for political parties to reform, I think that's very clear. But the reality is somewhat different also, in the sense that there is opportunity for political parties to consolidate. Center is the political space, but it is not the only political space in Nepal. Right? So you still have provincial governments and the provincial political space. You have the local political space. And there, the traditional parties are still very heavily invested. Their grassroots structures are well within those two layers. So how do you see this disjuncture where the center has already changed with the public mandate, and there is still a big room for political consolidation and maneuvering for traditional parties, some who want to change, some who don't want to change, to exercise those political spaces?
Yeah. Soumitra, you raise a very important point because on the one hand, you have the whole new government. I mean, we'll have it in the next few days. But look at the province and the 753 municipalities. We have the old, RSP, Rasapa is nowhere in the province and the local government bodies. What does this mean? Okay, but we're not talking about that. Okay, let's keep that aside. But yes, it's true that they are there. So they are also, in that sense, the old three parties are very important, significant component of Nepal's governance, even now, even after the new election, because until we have the next local and provincial elections in between 1 and 2 years, they will be there. And then, old parties, they may still perform relatively better. Who knows, right? That will depend on how RSP will perform. So, but yeah, so what that means is, one is, the national government vision, how are the province and the local governments beginning to transform themselves in terms of delivery. That number one. Number two, one of the reasons why our provinces have not been able to perform. One is the lack of laws, like the national parliaments, the government did not make laws, they did not enable. So there was no political will, there was this deliberate attempt to make the provinces, not as functional as they should have been. So, but now, how is this new government and the new parliament going to act in terms of making the provinces functional or make whatever changes if they want, or if not, how are they going to collaborate? Because federalism is a shared governance, right? In one sense. So I think that is going to be a key, and we have to see. I don't have much answer, but what I can say is that this is actually going to be very important. It's going to play out as important factor in the next 1 to 2 years before we have next local elections, and then how will RSP perform in the local election and the provincial elections, and the all three parties, they have been almost eliminated in terms of coming to power at the national level. So what does this mean? Is this going to be reflected at the province and the local? Will be very important.
Yeah, I think it's for RSP to lose in any case. I mean, you have the political parties. If they do well at local and provincial levels, that is where they're delivering services, especially local levels, right? So I think it will add value to the reputation of traditional political parties that they've changed. They're working on service delivery. I'm assuming political parties would just blame fingers on the central government, saying that, oh, Rasapar did not let us work, or their challenges they're not fine. So it is for Rasapar to kind of lose at that end. I would think so, but I might be wrong.
Sorry, can you elaborate something? Rasapa to lose means is the local parties. I mean, the locals are led by the all three parties.
Yeah, what I meant is because that is the point of service delivery. And that is now still in the control of traditional political parties. If traditional political parties do well, then it adds to their reputation and advantage in the coming elections, not just at the local level, but at also like 5 years down the line when we have the next federal elections. But if they are not able to perform well, I think the political parties will just end up pointing fingers at the central government in that manner of fashion, pointing fingers at Rasapa, saying that, okay, that is where the problem is.
Yeah, exactly. No, that will be important. Like very briefly, I think one is the Congress, UML, Nepali Communist Party. Their elected people at the local level, many of them just blame RSP because the central government did not do. I mean, even if there's not much issue, they might try to make it an issue. So, that may be one. And two, as you said, yeah. So I actually agree that the governance is the main expectation, good governance, and it's through the local bodies. Like, so how is RSP going to work? So we'll have to see how that collaboration takes place between RSP-led government in Kathmandu and all these other local governments led by the old parties.
Another thing I'm curious about RSP, and we're kind of moving into how they will govern. One unique thing about them is the current RSP is a strong emphasis on expertise and merit, right? If you look at their the members that have won, some are very technical, some are social activists. So, which is quite unique to our older parties. They also leaned heavily on the narrative of being a party of doers with delivery at the center of the message. Um, and especially different because the older parties were always about isms, this ism, and that isms had never delivered, or I wouldn't say never, but largely failed to deliver. Two-part question, I guess. The first one is, where do you think this the older parties, is the ideology-based politics coming, is changing? The other one, which we kind of started discussing, is what does this technocratic government mean in terms of what RSP can do in a system that is, we have a lot of systemic challenges. Your thoughts?
About the first question, the ideological politics, is it coming to an end? I think it's moving towards an end. And I'm really hoping that that is the case. Because in Nepal's recent history, the ideology-based politics haven't really delivered. And the parties, they are stuck within themselves, like within the ideology, as if the ideology is the goal. It's not a means. It has not been a means that for them, okay, their ideology is like, this is itself the goal. So, yeah, so I think RSP, as a political institution, without defining much of their ideology, and Balen Shah just joining RSP days before the election, people didn't care about ideology. So that, I think that is, I mean, if it comes back, I don't know. But looking at the current election results, I think we can safely say that Nepal has left behind that age of ideology-heavy politics. That's what I would.
Age of isms.
Isms, yeah. Age of isms, yeah. Thank you, Samitra. Now about the second, which is of course important, and then everyone is curious. I'm curious. This technocrat-led government and how is RSP? Yeah, as you rightly described, Nirzan, that they believe like doers are those who have capacity and choose those who know how to perform and all that. Now, okay, when you were putting that, I was thinking, in 1990s when I was a kid. When there was democracy, there was so much hope, and then there was so many tales about those leaders. That this guy is an expert, like an international class economist, and this guy is like socialist, or whatever that meant. Nobody cared much, maybe. So, but there were people because they were underground for like many years, but some of them were genuinely educated in some of the best universities in the world outside of Nepal, right? And they were in the democratic movement, and some of them were in the leftist movement. So they're really experts. So when there was the first government was made in like 1991 after the election, there was no dearth of experts. I'm looking back, but they were really people because they were underground for like many years and they were prepared and they were experts while they were in the democratic movement and Britain. Also true about many of the leftists at that time. Now, talk about RSP, coming back to RSP, they have a few experts, like non-experts who have joined them, but it's just a handful. It's just a handful. It is true that their slogan was "Janna lai chhanne," means okay, people elect those who know or who have the expertise. But how many of the people, like one is people didn't care who their local candidates were. They said Balam, like Soumitra said earlier in the conversation, that okay, they voted for Balen Shah. They didn't care who the local candidates were. Now, how many experts do they have? That's one question. They have a few, but okay, let's assume that okay, they will have a few. They have a few technocrats. But the real point will be, how are they going to have one vision? I'm not somebody who advocates for one vision. Okay, it's a diversity of opinions and perspectives. Right? It doesn't have to be that in the party like everybody believes in the same thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about vision in that sense. My point is, as a political institution, okay, now we have this mandate, and this is how we're going to deliver. So in the big picture, say on corruption, this is how we will approach. So on delivering governance, this is how we'll collaborate with the province, with the local, and this is our vision. So in the big picture, they're yet to define that vision. So yes, it is in that sense true, as you said, that because they do not have a long political history and they don't care much about having that one vision. And Balen Shah, I don't know if he doesn't believe in having a dialogue and developing a vision, or that he is the vision himself, or RSP as a party, whatever vision they have, let's say from 3.5 years to now, and Balen Shah, do their visions come together? There are many questions. So, but what I think on a positive note, almost everyone is new. I mean, some of them, like they had 21 parliamentarians in the last parliament. I think almost everyone is re-elected. Other than that, out of the 182, so they have say 160 plus new parliamentarians. They're new, so there is a lot of enthusiasm and the freshness that can be positive. But in terms of the technical expertise and a refined vision, that we're yet to see.
I just want to bring in some skepticism to this conversation, deliberate in a sense, to kind of unpack some of the fault lines within RSP. And this we discussed. You mentioned, Bishnu, of RSP being a rainbow and organizing in a fashion. They're still forming in that sense as a political party without a foundation. And this, I think, is widely discussed as a concern in the Nepali political space. But generally, people have those concerns, even though they voted for RSP. The initial days looks like they're a party organizing more like a corporate body than a traditional political institutions, where you have members and then you have a board. The party belongs to the board, right? And then the board decides and members follow. Given that this is a new context, so it's very hard to say how that will pan out in the Nepali context. But it becomes interesting when you start to think the mandate of RSP having to deliver improved governance and failing to improve governance at their own end. That contrast of of not being governed well within the party or having challenges there, but promising to deliver on the governance on the public space. I raise this point especially because we can't discount the fact that people have left the party previously, RSP, right? And some of the reasons that were cited primarily relate to how the party has been governed. So, how big a concern do you see? And do you see this disjuncture between internal governance and the mandate to deliver governance outside prominent in the days forward?
Can I just add something to this?
No, I like your. Please.
How much benefit of the doubt are you willing to give to them as well? I'd like to hear about that.
No. Interesting. They are interrelated. Like how it was healthy skepticism. I mean, I like skepticism. I mean, as long as we're not cynical, being skeptical is. We should be skeptical, right? And then, the benefit of doubt. To be honest, it's really difficult to say. I mean, difficult to say because empirically you can't say much. And I found the benefit of doubt, but before that, say RSP as a party was there. Ravi Lamisan as the president was already there. 3.5 years they were in the parliament, right? And then many of the people, like senior people like Sori Muagle and DP Aryal, they were fourth party, so they would not have to share big blame. They were in government a couple of times, but not for a long time. That's okay. But in terms of offering an alternative vision, did we see anything? There was not much. That the old are all bad, incompetent, corrupt. But okay, they were not in government. They just had 21 seats. They were the fourth party in the last parliament. But okay, this is how things should happen in terms of offering that in the parliament. Yeah, they say, okay, what is happening is wrong, needs to change. But what is that? No, they were not able to spell that out. If you look at RSP as a party, RSP leadership is pretty much the same. Rabi Lamisane, Soni Moagle, DP Aryal, of course, same lot, like Sumana Shrestha has left from one of their prominent ones. But rest of the team is still there, except that now they have Balen Shah. Of course, there are so many other people, but I'm saying in terms of major. So what Balen has brought in RSP, he hasn't uttered a word, except those 3 to 5 minute, a few political speeches he gave, which are like pretty basic, which was good, but they were basic. They were not like any political vision. So RSP as what alternative vision are they going to offer? My point is, also my skepticism is, they may have a vision, they may have thought about it, but people don't know. It's not public. Have they have a debate? No, right? So, and then what does it mean like to have Balen and RSP? Are they the same or different? Of course, technically as a party and Balen is the candidate, they are the same. But in terms of, again, I'm using this word vision a lot because, okay, let's say in terms of their approach or, how are they going to look at everything? No, nobody knows. And I'm repeating it again. I would like to repeat it deliberately. After Balen Shah joined RSP, I don't think they have had any discussion like internal in the party. Okay, now we've come together. And what does it mean? Coming to why Balen wanted to join politics and become prime minister versus what RSP was representing. Is there a harmony? Where do they meet? No, nothing has happened, right? So when I think about this, there is, of course, it makes me skeptical, but I just would like to hope that, okay, now they have this mandate and the clean slate, and they have the momentum. They have the momentum. But one point I would like to add here is that one is, if Balen as prime minister and his team, if they don't do anything wrong, that is itself going to be some achievement, right? People talk about these commissions about big contracts and then, all these passe, this chronic capitalism and all that thing. So at least if they have a clean start and then, create a hope with this momentum, and give a message to the civil service, for public service delivery that your old style or capacity is not going to be enough. Then at least when they have the momentum, they can start something good. But in terms of those, other big program and policy, I think we have to wait and see.
Yeah. My take is three things, right? So first is the bar is so low. You don't have to do a lot, as Bishnu you just mentioned. The second one is I think the party is structured to be slightly more empathetic to the general population, that which the Nepali population has not felt that the other parties have been quite good at. All you have to do is listen, right? And then the third is delivery. Now, there are many systemic challenges, but I think that given a new set of people, maybe something different will work. I think those are the three things where, how I give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, performance is a matter of, there are more factors than just the party itself. So, moving into the final segment, let's get a bit more concrete. With the government, which should be there soon, what are one or two most important areas of work that you think they should be engaged in? So maybe we can start with Bishnu, you, and then we'll go to Soumitra.
So I think on day one, the first message should be the composition of the cabinet, that are the people who have the credibility and required expertise to lead the ministries. Is that random, or they have a real thinking in terms of putting together that team of cabinet members? Because that will tell a lot. Number one. Number two, I hope Balen Shah, he doesn't talk much, but when he becomes prime minister, in his first address to wherever, to people or parliament or wherever, that he at least sets out how he thinks that things will be different now, especially on a couple of fronts. On the economic front, what is going to be that departure? How are things going to be different? In terms of curbing of corruption, because everyone thinks Nepal's major problem is corruption for public service delivery, for infrastructures, quality, and everything. So, what is it that is going to happen? So, other than what has been practiced and failed in the past. So, I think in terms of economic policy and agenda, and in terms of the good governance or on corruption, what is the government's policy, program, and approach? I think they will be the two most important things.
Can I ask you to explore further on that idea of what do you think, in terms of corruption, or is there any specific policy you want them to take forward? I know you said having a kind of being more open about what that approach is, but do you have some recommendations that the government should take as their particular policy reform?
Yeah, why I mentioned this point is it's easy to say, okay, when we come to power, we'll control corruption. The old ones also have said that many times in the past, but they failed to. RSP, was it only this rhetorics or like populist approach that, okay, let us come to power and then we'll see? Or do they really have a thought, or what are they going to do? So I would like to first hear from the new government what RSP, what Balen Shah will do. In terms of policy recommendation, the Commission on Investigation of Abuse of Authority, CIA, for example, as a constitutional body, it's a good one. But in the past many years, the government has given the responsibility, or the perception is that, okay, we have the CIA, they will take care of corruption. Not as if it is government's duty. Government has the primary mechanism to work on that. So this government, how are they going to address this? That controlling corruption is not the responsibility of only one constitutional body, but it starts from the top at the government level. What is going to be there? What is going to be different now? So in terms of recommendation, I think is it going to be that they will have a new policy, they will have new laws, or strengthen the existing commissions? I think what is important is that they offer something right from the beginning, rather than just say, okay, now we'll take care, because everyone in the past also has said that we'll take care of this. So I think now what we need is a specific, concrete approach and strategy that can be implemented from day one.
Sumitra?
I would see two priorities, and I'll express them in order, not in the order of 1, 2, but these are two different priorities. But I think you begin with economy, address the economy first. That is where the real problem is. But it will depend on where they dip their hands into first, the outcome of how public is going to react to their change process. But I think addressing the economy provides a win-win for both RSP as well as the public. That's where people want to see change. And I think that is where they can deliver the change at the earliest and the best possible timing. You could do a lot of things with economy. I don't think they have to invent the wheel too much on the economy. The structural constraints of what you can do with the current Nepali economy is well known. You don't have to interject with really big innovations to do that. I would say focus on capital expenditure. Find your ways to improve capital expenditure. And the framework already exists. There's been big reports, heavy studies done by everybody that point to what needs to be done. You just need to go and implement that. And as you said, Vishnu, there is no resistance. So they don't have to reinvent the wheel, go and improve capital expenditure that is going to move the economy forward. The second one is slightly esoteric in the sense that I would want to see some moral framing around accountability. And you mentioned this, Vishnu, that it cannot be done by accountability is not something that, or corruption is not something that an individual or an institution itself delivers. But as the head of the government, with very close to maturity, clear maturity, there has to be some framing on accountability. Who takes accountability of the government not being able to perform? Will the government, possibly led by Balen Shah, does he have the luxury of pointing fingers to the bureaucracy, saying that, oh, the bureaucracy was not cooperative? I think there isn't that moral authority that you can now point fingers to somebody else, and that framing has to evolve in the policy space. I'll stop there.
Okay. At my end, I'd focus on political party and electoral reforms, right? Because I think that's many of where our structural issues lie, and in many ways, the Gen Z movement in September was a result of this. Now, to be fair, this election was slightly different. The Nepali public did not go the regular route. But I still think that if the elections were to happen in a year or two, we will go back to our traditional ways. So let's look at the parties first. They lack internal democracy, something Bishnu mentioned earlier. Campaign financing is an issue, or just political financing, how political parties function. That is very opaque, right? And so that really needs to be worked on. Then tied to that is how do we do elections? The cost of campaigning is way too high that genuine people find it very difficult to compete. Like I said, this is a special election and it does not reflect that. But overall, I think this is where the structural problems of corruption, of patronage in Nepali politics lie. So when the political parties are very weak, when RSP also needs to become an institutionalized party, I think this is the right moment to both make the older parties accountable, but also RSP at the same time into a party that is accountable to the people, right? So for me, that's where I would focus. And that's all from my side today. You guys want to take a last shot on any final comments, and then we'll call it for the day.
This has been an interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Vishnu. I think some of the questions that we've raised today, these are questions we'll continue to converse and will have relevance for the political space as well as the economic space moving forward. So thank you so much, and then looking forward to catching up again, hopefully before the elections next time.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed the conversation, and as you said, Samit ran, there's like a big questions, and they will be important for the next few years. And then I also think, yeah, that is a great point. Once we have a new party, I think Nepal's new agenda should be the internal party, intra-party democracy, internal democracy in the party, because until and unless the parties reform from within, it will be unrealistic to expect the government that really, delivers, good governance. So yeah, that will be important. And yeah, let's see. And it's a major departure. There's so much to hope for, but also there's so many expectations, whether they will be fulfilled, many questions, but interesting times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon. Bye bye.